Hello and welcome back to Lead Wisely by WonderTour. We are continuing our series on game theory. This week we are talking about possibly the purest expression of game theory in popular media, the movie Moneyball, with Brad Pitt talking about the 2000s era Oakland Athletics baseball team and the sabermetrics revolution. We love metrics. The sabermetrics revolution that led to a quite different way of thinking about how you pick players and how you construct teams in baseball. So, I'm going to start right off with a tough question for Drew here, which is the question facing our protagonist, Billy Beane, at the beginning of the movie. Drew, how do you compete in an unfair game when the odds are tilted against you?
Thanks, Brian. Well, let's start out with how we start out most things here on Wonder Tour. We got to define the problem. And in Moneyball, you get this great scene where we have Billy Beane, Brad Pitt's character, and he walks in at the beginning and he's talking to the coaches and the scouts on the A's. And he's asking them, what is the problem? Each one of them is trying to answer the question a little bit differently. They're like, oh, we got to replace John B's production from last year since he went to the Yankees. We got to get X amount of home runs and RBIs and all of this in order to continue to compete. And he just keeps pressuring them. What is the problem actually? And so that has to be the starting point, Brian. Like we talked about, what is the problem? And the problem in that situation is that their payroll is going to be like a third of what the Yankees payroll is going to be. And yet they have to figure out how to field a competitive roster. So whenever it's an unfair game, I mean, the clear statement of the problem is critical because oftentimes I've seen in unfair games, kind of as they play out in reality, people get frustrated. And as a result, they get a cloudy version of the problem in front of them. We all do it, right? It's just, well, the problem is the system's unfair. The problem is blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay,
All right.
yeah, but what about the system is unfair? Because that's going to lead us to step two, which is to understand what is the bias and the efficiency of the system. And that's what we see as Billy Beane meets Pete. Pete's character kind of illuminates for Billy what the actual efficiency of the system is. He's like, the system biases towards big hits and players that look great because they sell tickets, they sell TV contracts, right? But for us, we have to potentially look at what other avenues we have. So, what actually matters in this situation? And that's where you can look at predicting a different target variable. In fact, companies have been doing this for the past handful of decades at this point, evolving the target variable that they're looking at. It used to always be about just revenue and profitability. But then we slanted towards with Amazon, like, no, it's more about revenue and it's more about customer equity and retention and all of these things, right? It's about the customer experience. And everybody's kind of taken that and we've continued to evolve that concept. I think you have to be looking at the overall system, what it biases towards, and what efficiency is in the system. Because in this situation, Pete found an efficiency that something that matters maybe the most is going to just be on base percentage, guys who can get on base. They can get in a position where they could score. So how do we take advantage of that if there are guys who can get on base but don't cost as much in the market? And I think this could be applied as we talk through the rest of our episode, Brian, in a number of different contexts. It's not always going to be so exploitable as it is in the premiere movie where we find out about how metrics changed baseball. But
Right.
there are edges to be exploited if we can have a clear definition of the problem and then try and understand through data what actually contributes to a good outcome and where is the efficiency at in terms of my spend or in terms of my energy or time investment.
Yeah, no. And again, we're in our game theory series. And so we're looking for these angles. We're looking for these edges. We're looking for these things. The thing that I love about this is that the way it contextualizes it, right, is right up front. He's like, okay, the problem is it's an unfair game. Like recognizing that you're at a disadvantage is really powerful. Like it's not just that other people are working harder than we are or they're smarter than we are or whatever. It's like, oh no, there's a structural disadvantage here. The Yankees have $120 million and I have $37 million. This is a problem. But then to go from that not to, well, I guess we're just toast. I guess this isn't going to work, right? To go from that to, so we cannot play the same exact game. We have to play the same game on the field, but we can't play the same game in recruiting and building a team because it's just not going to work. We just can't we can't go out and spend money on the player that everybody agrees is awesome. Billy Beane's first ability, the first thing that he does is just like, oh, yeah, this is unfair, so I got to do something different. I'm desperate. I'm going to try something else. So he's open to these new ideas, right? What can I do that they're not doing? What can I do that the Yankees aren't gonna, it's never gonna occur to them to do because they have $120 million. They can just get whatever player they want. They're not gonna think about players in this nuanced way, right? They're gonna go big. So how do we go at a different angle? It's a really cool, it's a really cool challenge for all of us to look at situations where we might feel like our business, our organization, our opportunity is at a disadvantage. Okay, what can we do that isn't playing the same game that the people with the existing resources are playing?
Yeah, and it's crucial once you figure out what the efficiency of the market is to, like you said, Brian, now I need to figure out what is the output variable or the outcome that I'm trying to achieve. What are the traditional inputs that people think about when it comes to achieving that outcome? And what are potentially some inputs that maybe the big dogs aren't looking at or my competitors aren't looking at? What if I could prove through statistics or through trials or whatever that these inputs are actually significant and that somebody's missing a significant input in the process? Now there's a potential advantage. There's a market efficiency you can take advantage of. And I think going forward in this episode, we'll talk about gathering of the information, how to leverage that information,
We'll throw
how
some
to.
fun game theory terms at you. Yes, yes. But first, let's do the intro. Hi, I'm Brian Nutwell.
And I'm Drew Perot.
And we are on a journey to lead wisely, to become better leaders by touring fantastic worlds and inspiring lore and the occasional sports parable by going on a WonderTour.
We connect leadership concepts to story context because it sticks to our brains better. You can find out more at WonderTourPodcast.com.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that this kind of movie is fun for us, right, is because it's more clearly applied to everyday life. Like, I'm not in a position of spending $40 million on baseball players, but the problems that Billy Beane is facing as a mid to high level manager of a struggling organization are more like the business challenges that we talk about than the I'm going to wipe out the world, zombies and monsters and jumping motorcycles off into helicopters problems that we see in some of our bigger media budget properties, right? So I like it in that respect. And I also like that the things that Billy Beane encounters in the course of this movie, in the course of trying to apply his radical new game theories, these are real things that we all see in organizational change management. Anytime you try to get a group of people to do something in a new way, right? When you're going for this, we have an opportunity that nobody else sees. Kind of by definition, one way to say it is like, oh, I have an insight that nobody else does. Another way to look at it is everyone else has a blind spot that I have uncovered, right? Is like, oh, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that nobody else looks at the world in this way. The problem with doing that as a leader is that it's almost certain that all of the people in your organization also don't look at the world that way. And so they all have the same blind spot and they all have the same, resistance to changing the way they're doing things, even if it's not going well. We say half jokingly on WonderTour a lot, right? Middle management are the white blood cells of the organization. Their job is to reject change. Like, it's not a bug. They're not doing it wrong. Like, that's actually what they're there for. They're people that were succeeded and they were promoted to some level of authority because they've demonstrated that they can keep the wheels turning. But when the whole organization isn't succeeding, when you're almost about to win the World Series, but you can't quite get over the hump because you just don't have the sluggers, and then all of your best players get cleaned out and you're totally toast, right? When you're in that situation, like, let's just do the same thing we did last year again, only less well, is not the strategy. But people in the middle don't ever see it that way. Like, my whole life is defined by doing this specific job in this specific way really well, and I want to keep doing that. And the scene with the scouts is exactly that. Like, it's fabulous. Like, all these ridiculous ways of evaluating. Well, he's got a really good jaw. Oh yeah, no, he's probably not a good player. His girlfriend's not attractive, and so he doesn't have any confidence. Like, ridiculous ways of thinking about things. But they've been doing it forever, and it works to some level. Like, it got them to the World Series, so they don't want to change.
Of course they don't.
Yeah.
But so in this situation, we have to figure out what can we do as leaders in order to get people to change their mind, right? And in this first episode, we're going to talk a lot more about the data and the game theory. How do we do that? There's opportunities where we can leverage, ways of thinking, ways of understanding numbers in order to kind of swing outcomes, right? So this is where maybe we have a little bit more control, but you still have to be pragmatic about it. You still have to realize if we're proposing this new way, on average, I forecast that we'll achieve a higher level of profitability. It's like, well, it doesn't necessarily always work out that way. You actually still have to take and make changes. You still have
Mhm.
to take risks, place bets, do things in a coherent way that is aligned with a strategy in order to get that all to work out. And that's what we see here with Billy Beane. At first, he buys into the theory from Pete. And his idea is just like, yeah, if we just do this, then it'll work, right? Like this new thing, it's great, and the maths. So
Yeah.
we should do it. And I've definitely been a part of things like this before, Brian,
Exactly.
where it's
Yes.
like the maths, and we should just do it. And so we go and build a machine learning model that does it, and crap, it doesn't actually work within the current organization. Like we needed at some point earlier on, ideally, to change the strategy. We needed to influence people in a certain way to change the
Hmm.
way that they're thinking and operating before we just brought them this new math and said this was a solution for them.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good way to say it, is that you have these wonderful techniques out of game theory, right? You have this, like, what was it, you were talking in the pre-show, like the asymmetric upside. You have
Mm-hmm.
the idea that I can do something where, like, the way I'm looking at the world, I see this benefit that nobody else sees, and my risk is much lower than my potential benefit, right? And if I play enough of those non-obvious moves, then I start to accumulate, in this case, I have more chances of people getting on base, which at the end of the day is what I want in baseball. So this asymmetric upside is something you're looking for. The other term we talked about was arbitrage, right? Like the idea that people are undervaluing assets, and so you can, or they're misvaluing assets, and so you
Mm-hmm.
can get more than you should for something that you already have, and you can pay less than you should for something that you want,
So let's
right?
talk about the mountaintop moment, Brian, because the
Right.
mountaintop moment is an example of those two things basically being combined. And it's a fun moment. It's one of the more fun moments in the movie. On WonderTour, the mountaintop moment is where we can kind of see the theme playing out in the individual moment and learn a lesson. And the moment here has got to be the trade for Rincon.
Who is a relief pitcher that they really want to finish out the season, as I recall.
Yeah, they need a closer, right?
Yeah.
I'm assuming it doesn't say that, but I'm guessing they need a closer, and Rincon is the closer. I vaguely remember Rincon,
Yeah.
as I do with most of these players.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the setup, I'll set it up. You could bring us in here. The setup of this is Billy Beane and Pete, his statistics advisor, in a room together with multiple telephones, right? And they have a goal. They want to get this player traded from another team, and they have a couple of assets that they're willing to shuffle around on their own team. But the other team is balking. They're like, oh, well, I've got somebody else that I think is going to give me a better offer, right? So you've got, like, the traditional way to solve this problem is to escalate. Well, I'll give you more money. Okay, well, I'll give you these 3 players. I'll give you these 2 players plus a bigger pile of money, right? But that's not what Billy Beane does. So what does he do here?
In this situation, he realizes an opportunity to capitalize on asymmetric upside of getting Rincon. So basically, if you think about it this way, there's two sides to any curve, right? There's like a downside end of the curve where at the far end, generally, it's less likely, but the downside is pretty significant. And there's an upside end of the curve where it's less likely, but the upside is pretty significant. And the assumption is that everything is a normal distribution and that it's always kind of fair on either end, depending on how far out you want to take a risk. That's how much benefit that you'll get. What we see here is the opportunity to play arbitrage on both ends of the curve. So
Mm,
what happens is Billy Beane has this opportunity. He's told us since the beginning of the movie he wants Rincon.
mm-hmm,
He already went to the Cleveland team and tried to get Rincon in like the second scene in the movie.
right.
This time he calls them and he makes an offer for him, and it's a pretty fair offer. But Cleveland's like, well, actually, we have another suitor. And I don't even remember who the other suitor is, but they have another suitor. And the response that Bean has is brilliant because he's like, well, he's a Rincon on our team, given our situation. This is really important for us. We could potentially stand to benefit a lot from him if things work out really well. On the flip side, though, now he has information. He has information that this other team is also looking for a relief pitcher. And so he is like, well, if we're getting Rincon, then we could just get rid of a mediocre relief pitcher that we have and and we could get rid of him really, really cheap. And so he flips it and he calls the other team and he's like, well, I hear you're in the market, and we have a guy that we just got to get rid of. And they can't even hardly believe it. They're like, why would you just want to get rid of him? And so to this other team, he's giving them a low end outcome bet, basically, right? Like, it might be middle of the curve, actually, but it's probably a middle of the curve bet, right? Decent
But
reward, decent
they don't have to pay much for it. So
investment.
like it's a low risk thing. Great, sign me up.
Exactly. He sells them on the low risk, but the problem with the low risk is it's not a very efficient bet because you're not necessarily going to get much out of it. What do you get if you win is the classic question when you're talking about asymmetric upside. And on the opposite side, what do you get if you win? If you get Rincon, who ends up being a great closer and leads you into the playoffs, is huge. And so he's willing to play this game where he sacrifices an asset that he has and he takes a beating on it, basically. Like when he sells it, he's like, all right, I'll take a loss on this. And on the other side, he even pays a premium, right? Out of his own pocket, he has to pay 250K in order to bring in Rincon. But he's making a bet. He's saying if this team that we have is in fact good, which I think it is, it has a chance to play into the playoffs. We need somebody who can close these games out in a way that we don't currently have. And if that guy is good, then not only can I play him this season, but I'm actually going to make a deal with the owner that I can sell him next season and I'll take a profit on his contract because I'm the one paying the 250K.
So yeah, so it's wonderful. Like it's a fun scene to watch, right? But it's all asymmetric information. Like he's working the phones with like 3 different parties, and none of them sees the full picture except him. And so he's able to sort of manipulate them into doing the thing that he wants, which is like, you're going to take this player, so you don't need this pitcher anymore. So you're not going to ask him for anything. So you're going to be willing to sell to me at a lower price, and I'm going to get the money from this other place. And yeah, it's very skillfully played, and it's all telephone. Like there's no other humans in the room. He's not talking to any of these players. He's not, it's just moving the chess pieces around on the board. But it's done with this game theory mindset where he's looking at the world in a different way. He's looking at his strategy in a different way, and he's not just trying to win one trade at a time. He's trying to win the whole arrangement of pieces on the board.
Exactly. And that is the key. So that's where this is different than Pete just modeling out, basically running a simulation for how many runs they're going to score, depending on what their on base percentage is, blah, blah, blah. This is different because he's actually taking a loss on potentially both of these trades that he's making.
Right.
Definitely taking a loss on selling the guy cheap, potentially taking a loss on taking a higher risk investment into Rincon, which could pay off or could not. But that, like you said, Brian, that's the key. There's an intrinsic benefit. And this is a much, much more applicable thing to our daily lives and our businesses because, like we said, you don't always end up being the company that comes up with sabermetrics and changes the world, but you do know your own strategy. You know the context of your own business. We know that better than anybody else knows that. And
Right.
so we can take advantage of intrinsic benefits. In this situation, we're defining intrinsic benefit as the ability to gain additional outcome, basically, whatever you want to quantify the outcome as, a win percentage, whatever, right? Through the overall, through the strategy, not just through an individual transaction. So he makes a good deal with Cleveland. He makes a good deal with the other team for both of those teams. But the A's actually win because between the two of them, it pushes them further towards the completion of or fulfillment of their strategy in a way that each of the individual moves would not have.
Right. And I think that's really where we need to land this, right? Is that in the unfair game, like the first step is recognizing that it's unfair. The second step is taking a different approach that everybody else has, like unlocking some blind spot, unlocking some unique insight that you have. But then what you just said is super important is that one step at a time, one move at a time, one advantage at a time is never going to add up to like winning the World Series, right? It has to be a coherent picture of like the whole organization is designed and executed top down to attack that strategy, to take advantage of those asymmetries. And you have to keep that picture in mind every time you're making a move. You have to keep that picture in mind with your management techniques. And that's very different. That's where you go from game theory to game practice. Right. And so I think what we're going to talk about next in our next episode is going to be what are Billy Beane's leadership superpowers? What are the techniques that he uses to actually take that theory and put it into practice? Like, how do you get this done on the ground? And how is that different than just the theory?
Yeah. And I actually just want to bring in a kind of flip side example of this here for the practical application real quick, because I think this one makes the most sense. Recently, in our current time, in 2025, the Denver Nuggets, with like 10 days left in the NBA season, which is unprecedented, they fired their head coach and announced that their general manager would not be renewed, which is pretty crazy. This is totally unprecedented, especially for a playoff team that has the best player in the world, Nikola Jokic, on the team. It's insane, right? But the problem is the strategy was not coherent. The transactions, while each individual transaction may have been efficient in a way that the GM was making, while the way that the coach was coaching the team may have been efficient in a way, they were not working well together. What you ended up with was a coach in Michael Malone who was trying to build a team that was complementary to Nikola Jokic. That was it. I'm just going to build a team to build around the greatest player the world has ever seen, basically. He's a huge dude who gets a triple double every single night, right? The world doesn't usually see a center who can play defense, is the best offensive player in the league, and this is insane from a numbers perspective, but he has the greatest disparity on record between his on-off plus minus, meaning when he is on the court, the team is the best offense in the league. When he is off the court, the team is basically the worst offense in the league. It is unbelievable.
Yes. So I guess they've done a good job. They have built the team around him because it doesn't work when he's not there.
Yeah, but the problem is the GM wanted to play this 5-10 year approach where, I don't want to get into the NBA salary cap, but they're under the second apron, meaning they're not willing to pay money, despite the fact that they're not a small market team. They're not willing to pay money in order to expand the salary cap. They're not putting the right complementary players in place around Jokic. Instead, he's trying to build with these young guys that are going to take years to build. And they have some young guys with promise, but they're not here. And Jokic is in his prime. What are you doing? And so in the end, it gets both of them fired. And this is like the bad example of what it could have happened with Billy Beane and the manager Art in Moneyball.
If you don't connect the dots, if you don't make everything consistent with your strategy, then even the best pieces in the world won't necessarily get you to where you want to be.
Yeah, so you get over-indexed on this trade or this free agent that we're signing or whatever. We got a great deal on it. Yeah, but it's not moving you in the right direction as an organization. You're actually getting worse.
Awesome. Terrible, but awesome. All right, cool. Well, I think that's it for this episode. We've talked a lot about game theory. We've got Billy Beane in a position where he could potentially win a whole bunch of games. He's done a really good job assembling the team. Now let's talk about next episode, his leadership techniques that actually land the deal. Next week, Moneyball Part 2. Thanks for joining us on this journey to become better leaders, to lead wisely, and we hope you'll come back next week. In the meantime, just remember, as always, character is destiny.